A number of Star Wars insiders have informed Endymion that there is a clear agenda at play happening within Lucasfilm and the Walt Disney Company. Specifically, he says that they are working with GLAAD, an LGBTQ plus activist and lobbyist organization, to enact an evil anti-white agenda. Furthermore, these insiders also claim that, as we have seen from former Amazon and, in fact, Disney executive Roy Price, is that these people actually hate their own audience. And obviously, we have seen this play out over the last number of years. This is all something that is very easily discernible based on the things that they've created, based on the things that they've done, based on a lot of other leaked things we've seen from this company. But we are now hearing from people who have worked with them, been on the inside, and are now finally finding the courage to speak up and expose this stuff for what it is. They have had enough. And I find this very, very interesting. I do think it signals that there is seemingly a shift. People are no longer cowering in fear. They are willing to reach out to people like Endymion, like Smash JT, like myself, and reveal what is actually going on behind the scenes at these companies. And they're willing to expose it, and they're willing to put themselves at risk in order to do so. So let's get to this right here. Roll this up over at phantompulse.com. You can find the link in the description below. I encourage you to head on over there, become a paid subscriber, help support us in fighting back against this evil ideology, this evil agenda that is infecting our video games, our movies, our television shows, our books, our tabletop games, our entertainment at large, and is fundamentally trying to destroy our culture and society. So, as I said, YouTuber Endymion shared what his Star Wars insiders told him. First, he detailed how Disney looks at its audience. He said this: "From what I was told, Disney looks at the paying customer base in two specific groups. There's the modern audience. That's the one they want to cater to more than anything else. And then there's what they call the problematic audience. That's me and likely you as well. Obviously, me too. I know that they do not like me. They have done lots of posts on their official Star Wars account, specifically reacting to my coverage of how insidious some of their employees are, namely Christina Ariel and her obvious anti-white agenda and anti-white posts that she was putting up back in like 2020, 2021, etc. She still works at the company, right? They have not gotten rid of her. So if you haven't gotten rid of her, I think it's very clear that you support her. And that's exactly what they did. They did a whole post supporting her. Anyways, Endymion goes on and says this: "As I was told by these sources, Disney is pushing for what they call atomization, is to split the audience up and isolate them from each other. So when you play a game and see all of the woke agenda in it, you feel like you're the only one who notices or cares." Well, that has not worked whatsoever, thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, thanks to X. I think it was working when they were able to control almost all of the social media platforms, when they had Twitter, when they had Facebook, when they had Google, when they had YouTube. But since Elon Musk purchased X, he broke that kind of control that they had, and they're no longer able to really enact this agenda that they have. And people are able to find each other. It was much more difficult, I think, before Musk bought Twitter, turned it into X. Anyways, it goes on and says, "The problem is people like us are getting together and calling out things like this all the time. So they want to scatter us with content they don't want until we all walk away while consolidating the modern audience, so to speak, instead to form a stronger base going forward into the future." Now, this is very obvious. You just look at the Acolyte, look at everything they've done with Star Wars. Clearly trying to push the agenda. Kathleen Kennedy has been talking about this going so far back as like 2015, 2016, where she did this I think it was like Fortune conference, like women in media conference or whatever, where she's literally talking about how she has this whole feminist agenda that she's enacting with Star Wars. And this was all before they even released The Force Awakens. So this is clearly what they were trying to do. They were trying to cultivate this whole new modern audience, and they thought that that would be able to sustain them moving forward. Clearly, that hasn't worked. They've had failure after failure after failure after failure, and they haven't really had any success. I think you can look at maybe Rogue One as like the only success that they've had, and then maybe The Mandalorian people were in on that. But I do think that the agenda was always there from the very beginning. You see it. I mean, especially even in season 2, where you see Boba Fett getting like kneed in the groin, and then he fights to a standstill with the WWE actress. I don't even remember her name. And then you have the whole like A-Force formation with Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, like leading the charge. And it's all like the women like going on to take out the Empire. It was clear agenda was in play there. Anyways, pretty much they are doing this in hopes that in the future, this modern audience becomes its own behemoth that is equal to or surpasses the current problematic audience, until eventually Disney is no longer required to cater to the wants and needs of people that they hate. Anyways, well, that is not happening whatsoever. They are not able to have this modern audience indoctrinated into their ways, but they're still trying, right? They're literally targeting pre-K children with this agenda. They have non-binary characters in their Star Wars Jedi Young Adventures show. So they're still trying to indoctrinate these people. And then obviously some of their other stuff is trying to humiliate them. You look at things like The Acolyte with that, and we can see how The Acolyte was a total disaster, canceled after 1 season, when they clearly were trying to get a second season for that show. But no one tuned in. The modern audience did not watch. Next, Endymion detailed that activist and lobbyist group GLAAD wields significant power and influence over video game companies at large, as well as at major entertainment companies like the Walt Disney Company. He said this: while Sweet Baby Inc. is definitely a force to be reckoned with in its own right, there is a much bigger fish that controls even Sweet Baby from the strings above. That company is GLAAD. GLAAD, as I'm told, has insane amounts of power when it comes to what they want to see in media. So much so they can even stand shoulder to shoulder with places like Disney when it comes to injecting DEI into content going forward. We see this. People like Victoria Alonso, who was a VP over at Marvel Studios before she got fired, was literally standing at a GLAAD podium at the GLAAD Awards or whatever it was, condemning Bob Chapek just a couple of years ago. So they do and wield significant power, and they just actually started launching this whole like video game report thing. And these reports are used to basically manipulate studios into pushing these disordered, sinful lifestyles and actions, such as sodomy. And things like that. And you can see here is part of their report card where they're grading Walt Disney Studios, saying of the 14 LGBTQ inclusive films, 3 were Walt Disney Studios, 4 were Searchlight Pictures, 7 were Hulu, 0 were 20th Century Studios or Disney Plus. Considering the quality, quantity, and diversity of films distributed under the Walt Disney Company and its labels, GLAAD has given the Walt Disney Company a insufficient grade, and they're never going to give people like positives. And if they do give a positive, that it'll be kind of like, well, there's still more room where you can push this disordered, evil agenda, and you should be doing that. And they're always going to be pushing you further down the slippery slope, because it didn't used to be about transgenderism, right? They didn't used to do that. It used to just be lesbian and gays. Now it's transgenders too, and who even knows what else they're going to be doing in the future. I don't even want to think about that. But that is what this group does. They are pushing you down the slippery slide. They are progressing or trying to progress you into hell, move you further down those circles of hell, as Dante describes them in the Inferno. Furthermore, Endymion detailed that Disney despises anyone who is participating in GamerGate 2.0. That is not surprising, because I do think a lot of people who are participating in GamerGate 2.0 have also been very critical of the MCU, as well as the feminist Star Wars Forces Female garbage that they've been pushing in that. And he said this: one of the biggest problems of this problematic audience that Disney hates with all of their being is, of course, GamerGate 2. They find the entire movement repulsive, and they are constantly worried that anything and everything they make will get targeted by GamerGate 2.0. I think that's pretty true, given all we've seen from them, right? I mean, they always are pushing us down that slippery slope, right? That's the Walt Disney Company is doing that as well. Claiming that the power the movement has is snowballing to a point where the entire thing has grown into its own being that simply cannot be stopped. Disney specifically hates GamerGate 2 and wants it gone, but will not give up on DEI or the agenda at large. They truly think that they can push these things until we accept them. And they are not giving up on this stuff. We see this over and over again. Just look at what they're doing in Marvel Comics. There's still all kinds of degeneracy happening over there. They're doing it in the Star Wars comics as well. We just look at The Acolyte. That's coming. We know that there's a report that in the Skeleton Crew, they're going to be pushing a disordered relationship as well. They're going to keep doing this over and over and over again until you or until they hope that you accept it. But we are not going to accept it. They can do whatever they want with Star Wars, whatever they want with Marvel. We're going to sit here and point and laugh at them now because they have pooped on their own toys, and now they're playing with a poopy toy, and they're left holding a massive, massive bag. And what ends up happening is you get massive layoffs, you get shutdowns, and we've seen that throughout this year. And the Walt Disney Company is not immune to any of that either. As for the people who are running the show at Lucasfilm underneath Kathleen Kennedy to push this agenda, Endymion identified the company's senior vice president of franchise content and strategy, James Waugh, and Douglas Riley, the vice president of Lucasfilm Games. Regarding Waugh, Endymion relayed this: "I'm told he's pretty much Kathleen Kennedy's right-hand man, and whatever he says or votes for, it speaks for her as well." And I just want to point out that James Waugh is the architect of the whole High Republic movement, which was clearly a movement to push all of this DEI garbage into Star Wars, where it would be separated from Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Lando Calrissian, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, etc. And they wanted to do all of their sick agenda through this High Republic, and that's obviously seen with the Acolyte and all the things that they did there with their lesbian witches, and then obviously you see that in their comics, in their books, where they're pushing all kinds of gender ideology and disordered lifestyles as well. Demian goes on and says, beneath James are people like Douglas Riley, who is specifically in charge of the games division side when it comes to Disney and their products. He shared this: as I'm told, and this really annoyed my sources, is that this board, so there's like a board, he talks about this like a editorial board that these people are kind of on. And so this editorial board has the ultimate power to completely veto and block anything using their IP from ever coming out. This means if you spend money making something, but Disney doesn't like it, too bad, because you have zero say, even though Disney themselves have not really spent a single cent on the project that you have been making for all this time. So basically, they contract with third parties to make video games, to create other things, and it all has to be funneled through this editorial board. And if the editorial board doesn't like it, it doesn't adhere to their woke agenda, then they basically tell you that can't happen. And so you're spending all this money, you're on the hook for it, and Disney kind of is able to just dictate the woke agenda. And they drains these other companies. And I think these companies are going to figure this out very quickly, so they'll stop wanting to license this property. I have a feeling Ubisoft is learning that lesson the hard way right now with Star Wars Outlaws and how massive a disaster that game has been for them. So amid providing details about Quantic Dream's upcoming Star Wars Eclipse game, Endymion revealed how Disney's DEI agenda has affected it. He says this: as I was told by sources, Disney is very hell-bent on ensuring that Eclipse has tons of non-binary and diversity within its characters and world. From what I was told, there was originally about 2 white playable characters in the game, but this has also now changed as well. I wasn't told names of the characters or anything, but there's this one white woman in the trailer. This character is no longer a white woman anymore. She was one of the playable characters, but Disney apparently forced Quantic to make her a black woman, citing they were completely against white representation within the game. The only other white character, from what I'm told, is a man who ends up getting gravely injured and becomes a cyborg or some sort of robot. Possibly their brain is placed in a droid or something like that. But the point is that Disney, like I said, would not allow Quantic Dream to have any heroic white representation in Eclipse at all. Everyone had to be diverse, have some sort of gender identity, and the only 2 white characters were either erased completely or turned into a robot, as I'm told. He said this frustrated my sources, who said Disney kept pushing for lots of gender and pandering within Eclipse, even in many instances where these demands, well, they made zero sense at all. Disney made demands to Quantic Dream to enforce things like non-gendered representation within Eclipse as well. What this means is that Disney mandated that Quantic Dream add stuff like male aliens in female clothing and vice versa. They wanted the galaxy to be insanely diverse and just go buck wild when it comes to gender identity. None of this is surprising at all. We know through the Reimagine Tomorrow leaks that were, like 2-3 years ago now, that Christopher Rufo leaked. They had created a whole kind of document or measuring tool to measure how woke their games were, how representative their games were, how diverse their games were. And it was created by this person who was working on the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur children's show. And that was obviously going to be used, I think, throughout the rest of their company. So we saw this. We saw that they have a not-so-secret gay agenda. We heard that they were removing gender language in the parks, etc., because they were all trying to push these disordered agendas. They're trying to push gender ideology, etc., these disordered lifestyles that should never, ever be accepted or tolerated. So none of that is surprising to me at all. Next, Endymion explained why this is happening. As I'm told, a lot of the reason why this sort of stuff happens is because Kathleen Kennedy wants to keep the people that she trusts happy with the direction of Disney, who obviously enforces the stuff. He pointed to J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof as people who greatly support this agenda and want to see more of it at literally any cost. I think that's probably accurate, although I'm not sure how much influence they have over Lucasfilm and Star Wars anymore. Obviously, Lindelof was removed from the Rey project. J.J. Abrams, last we know that he was working on Star Wars was The Rise of Skywalker. And so I'm not really sure how involved they are anymore, but we do know that these people are heavily involved in this agenda. Lindelof obviously did that whole Watchmen show, which was all just a racist allegory. And then Abrams obviously came out with his super woke, super discriminatory policies in the wake of the Black Lives Matter riots during the Summer of Love in 2020. Just truly vile stuff in that Bad Robot policy book that they released. These various stakeholders in Disney demand gender identity nonsense, so Kathleen Kennedy is appeasing them as best she can. I think Kathleen Kennedy's all about this stuff too. If she wanted to, she could probably say no. Or if she actually had any kind of principle, she would say no and stand up for this stuff. But clearly, she's letting it happen and going on. And then here's obviously a screenshot of what GLAAD is all about, right? Video game remakes provide opportunities to tell better LGBTQ stories. So it's all about taking these things that were popular in the past and remaking them in the degenerate, disordered image of the LGBTQ agenda right here. I mean, this is literally what they're advocating for. It is what I like to say, the Last Jedi phrase that Rian Johnson made up: "Let the past die, kill it if you have to, remake it in our image." Add that little part to it, and that is literally what these people want to do. In fact, he then revealed that the whole High Republic initiative, which Eclipse is part of, is an attempt, quote, to redefine what Star Wars is to the audience at large. Obviously, if you've seen anything that they're doing with the High Republic, I think this is apparent. I think it's apparent. And it's very clear that this is what they were doing. The goal here is to transition Star Wars from what it was into an exclusively non-white, non-straight future going forward. I think they even had like a whiteboard where they were like actually in like their promo trailer for this that showed that this is what they were doing. It was like they had all of these things written down on what they wanted to do, and this was all on it. And Disney's editorial board, which I'm told is almost exclusively white people themselves, see whiteness as a problem when it comes to content creation. Of course they do. Of course they do. Because that's really what diversity is all about. It's all about being anti-white. It's very clear. There's even articles in 2016 that state that. The exact term I was told was that Disney wants to peel away the whiteness from Star Wars specifically, but they are also trying to get into every facet of their organization. Endymion also shared that GLAAD was involved in the production of the game as well and was used, quote, to basically tell Disney whether the game was woke enough or not, and it didn't matter what anybody working on these games thought. They just had to do what they were told, and that's it. So GLAAD is basically a super sweet baby, and they act as this base consultant that is approving what is in these games at the behest of the Walt Disney Company. Not surprising at all whatsoever. We know that that's exactly what this organization does and has been doing for years, specifically within movies and television. And they do this because they know that it is highly influential. What you consume, what you watch, what you read does indeed affect your behavior. It's very clear. I mean, Jon Favreau has even talked about this. He says, what we're doing now is passing down the values through our shows to the next generation. Like, he has literally said that within the last couple years. Like, that is what this is an objective truth. According to my sources, GLAAD told Quantic Dream that the audience of the future is going to be almost 50-50 with a slant, so to speak, towards non-binary. This is absolutely absurd. Again, this is a lie that they use to try and manipulate people to push their agenda. This is just not going to happen. Non-binary doesn't exist. You are either a man or woman, and that's going to continue to happen. It's down to our DNA. It's the way God made us. So if they want to keep making money in the business, they need to cater to that audience a lot. And therefore, anything made by Disney specifically must adhere to this in fear of losing out on potential profits, apparently. So that's how they're trying to justify this. It's all fake. It's all a lie. Anyone believing this hasn't been paying attention the last couple of years. This stuff all fails. And it all fails tremendously because it's evil. It's evil and it's unnatural. And you can see here, they do have their inaugural gaming report. Growing number of LGBTQ gamers, while LGBTQ characters in games lag far behind. So this is just propaganda, totally made up in order to try to convince video game developers to push this evil. Like that's what they do. This is what GLAAD does. So Endymion then reiterated this. The end goal here, as I'm told, is that Disney and other groups are hoping that with enough content and time that the modern audience will become self-sustaining so that they can throw away the problematic audience completely. They hate us, is what I'm told. They think we're awful and racist and are too attached to what they deem the old ways. I mean, we've seen this, right? You can just look at what they did with the Acolyte. They had that whole like rap video that Amanda Stenberg did. We've seen this with Ewan McGregor on the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and how he was like saying people were being racist to the actress in that show. She even shared screenshots to her Instagram. You looked at them, there was maybe one that was questionable. The other were literally just pointing out the Walt Disney Company's like DEI policies and the fact that they literally hire people based on sex and race and sexuality. It's literally on their Reimagine Tomorrow website. There's a EEOC complaint that has been filed against them by America First Legal because of this. Like that's not racist to point that they have illegal hiring practices. But that's what they were trying to say. You're racist for pointing out they have illegal hiring practices. So we've seen this, right? This is the Walt Disney Company, right? We've seen all of this, documenting this for years. So Endymion goes on and says, I'm also told this agenda of erasing white people is prevalent across the industry. They specifically called out Dragon Age: The Veilguard and Concord as being prime examples of what these sort of groups want to see more of in the future. That is a big reason why those games are the way that they are. Lots of trans heroes, lots of gay representation. Evil people are always white, and lots of sexual orientation across the board. Yeah, we've seen this throughout Hollywood. Obviously, now it is infecting the video game industry. There's a reason why Yasuke is black and not a Japanese man. That's why they made Yasuke the main character in Assassin's Creed Shadows. There's a reason why they made Kay Vess the protagonist in Star Wars Outlaws. They do this all on purpose. They tell you they do it on purpose, and they tell you they're doing it because of feminism or whatever evil tentacle of woke ideology it's a part of. The actress who played Kay Vess talked about how it's all about trying to push feminism. Like she's on record saying that. D-Man goes on and says, GLAAD is the puppet master pretty much for all of this. GLAAD tells Sweet Baby how high to jump, and they just do as they're told. He later detailed that GLAAD is one of the reasons why female characters are smacked with the ugly stick as well. He says, I was told the other reason games like Star Wars Outlaws look the way that it does, and especially Kay Vess being ugly, is actually not because of Ubisoft, but is due to the demands of GLAAD and Disney. The editorial group at Disney that works with GLAAD specifically demands that women are not made attractive in any of their media going forward, like across the board. Disney and GLAAD, as my sources told me, say the big reason is not just because they don't want to sexualize their characters, although that is one of the reasons. But in their view, if a female character is less attractive, then audiences will take her more seriously rather than just seeing her as eye candy. I think Star Wars Outlaws is living proof that is not true. People took this character even less seriously. So again, they just lie to you to try to push this agenda. So that is the latest on what is happening within the Walt Disney Company from Endymion's inside sources. This stuff is not going away. This stuff has been institutionalized. These people are in high levels of power. They're going to continue to push this stuff. They don't care. They're not using their money. They don't actually pay any consequences for these failures. This is going to continue to happen. That is why we have to be principled. We have to stand against this. We have to close our wallets to this. And we have been, and we can still do that. Look what we have done just this year. How many studios have been shut down because they've embraced this? They are no longer able to create this propaganda anymore because of it. And that is a good thing. That is a very, very good thing that many of these studios have indeed been shut down, that were pushing this evil, and now they can no longer do it. And that is a good thing. And we were going to continue to celebrate that. We are going to continue to work towards that. That's not to say we aren't against forgiveness. We are. If these people truly repent and actively make changes to start criticizing this, to start opposing this agenda, and are making stories, video games, movies, TV shows that paint it as the evil that it is, we will congratulate them for that. But they have significantly lost our trust as well. I think the Indiana Jones game is a perfect example of that. I haven't played it. I don't really know what's in it. But there were massive red flags about that game. And they broke trust with what they did with Dial of Destiny. And the user counts on that game are absolutely abysmal right now, even though it's just even with it being in advanced access. I think last I saw it was still below 5,000 peak, which is horrible. It means the sales are terrible. And they have only to blame themselves because they created the brand that they have, that their brand is woke. Their brand is evil. And they promote evil. And people are not interested in that. And they are not going to open their wallets for them. We're going to continue to close our wallets for this stuff. So let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.